It started like any other quiet Saturday morning on our ranch, horses grazing, birds calling out across the open sky, and the sun breaking through that soft orange haze we've come to love out here in the Texas countryside. My wife had just stepped out to check the fence line, something she's done 100 times before, only this time she had her holstered sidearm on her hip. It wasn't anything unusual, not out here. Not when you live on acres of land where rattlesnakes and coyotes roam just as freely as the breeze. But within 30 minutes, we had 2 sheriff's units creeping up our gravel driveway. Lights off. No sirens. Just the slow, unsettling crunch of tires over rock, like something out of a movie where you already know it's not going to end well. And that's when I saw her. Karen. She stood across the road, arms folded tight across her chest, that signature scowl plastered on her face like she was born with it. You know the type, blonde bob, pastel visor, and enough entitlement to fill a country club. She had her phone clutched like it was a trophy, her eyes locked on my wife like she'd just caught a fugitive in her neighborhood, except we weren't in a neighborhood. We were on our land. Karen had called the cops on my wife for brandishing a weapon. Not threatening anyone. Not waving it around. Just wearing it. Legally. On her own property. What Karen didn't know, what made the whole thing not just infuriating but also almost poetic, was that my wife is the police. A decorated officer with over a decade of service. Trained. Certified. Sworn. And in that moment, she wasn't just a woman with a gun on her hip, she was off-duty law enforcement walking her own ranch. But Karen didn't care about that. And as the officers approached my wife with caution, hands resting just a little too close to their belts, my stomach twisted. Because I could see it in their faces, they didn't know who she was either. Not yet. And they were responding to a call made by someone who had decided that a woman, specifically my wife, had no business wearing a gun. That's where the story really begins. Because this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't just a false report. It was something deeper, about judgment, about fear, and about what happens when someone thinks their prejudice gives them power. It was about what it feels like to be treated as a threat on your own land, simply because someone else couldn't stand the sight of strength that looked different than they expected. What followed was a moment that could have changed everything. One wrong word. One move too fast. One assumption acted upon, and things could have gone sideways, fast. But the question is, how do you prove who you are when someone's already decided what you're not? And what happens when the person in uniform isn't just the one responding to the call, but the one being called on? Stay with me, because the moment my wife reached into her pocket, not for her weapon, but for her badge, was the moment everything changed. Only Karen wasn't ready for that. And the look on her face? You won't believe what she said next. The air felt too still for that hour. Even the horses had gone quiet, sensing the shift in mood like animals do. My wife, Sarah, stood firm, her posture calm but alert. She didn't flinch when the officers stepped closer. She didn't need to. This wasn't her first time being on the wrong end of someone else's assumptions. What the deputies didn't know, and what Karen certainly didn't care to find out, was that Sarah had served 8 years on the city force before we moved out here. She'd seen it all: domestic calls turned violent, drug busts gone sideways, traffic stops that ended with tears, and broken families. She didn't wear her badge like a shield, she wore it like a promise. But on her days off, especially out here on the ranch, she didn't wear it at all. She just lived. That's what we were doing when Karen called the cops, living. It hadn't always been easy. Moving out here was supposed to give us a fresh start. After Sarah testified in that federal case against one of her own, an officer who crossed the line too many times, we knew things in the department would never be the same. She faced the fallout quietly, but I saw what it did to her. The betrayal. The silence from people she thought were her brothers. So when we found this land, 5 acres of peace and space to breathe, it felt like a chance to heal. But peace has a way of drawing out people who hate seeing someone else at ease. Karen lived on the edge of the subdivision that bordered our ranch. Technically, she wasn't even part of our HOA anymore, but she still acted like the self-appointed sheriff of the neighborhood. She'd already complained about our fence being too rustic, our goats being too loud, and even told one of our teen helpers that he looked suspicious for sitting in his car too long. So when she saw Sarah walking the fence line with her firearm visible, that was it. She dialed 911 and told them a woman was walking around brandishing a gun near a residential neighborhood. She left out the part about the badge. The deputies asked for ID. Sarah gave it to them without hesitation. But the strange thing was they hesitated. It was like they didn't quite believe her at first. Maybe it was the civilian clothes. Maybe it was the ponytail. Or maybe they'd already formed a picture in their heads before they even pulled into the driveway. I stood at the porch, watching it all unfold, heart pounding, every muscle tense. I knew how fast things could go wrong. Not because Sarah would do anything reckless, but because it only takes a second for someone else to panic. And Karen stood by, arms still crossed, watching like this was entertainment, like she wanted to see something go wrong. What Karen didn't know, what she never expected, was that Sarah's badge wasn't the only thing she carried with pride. It was the story behind it, the scars, the strength it took to speak up when everyone else stayed silent. And if Karen thought a phone call could strip that away, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. But before Sarah could say a word, one of the deputies leaned in and said something that made her pause. That's when everything shifted. Sarah tilted her head slightly when the younger deputy muttered something low to his partner. Just enough for her to catch the edge of a word. Suspension? Her jaw didn't move, but I saw her eyes harden. Just for a second. I knew that look. It wasn't fear. It was disappointment. That one word hit like a rock thrown through glass. Because Sarah had been placed on leave, administrative, not disciplinary, after the internal affairs hearing wrapped. The testimony she gave against the officer who used excessive force had split the department right down the middle. And while she'd done everything by the book, that didn't stop the blowback. No formal charges were filed against her. No wrongdoing found. But still, the higher-ups needed things to cool down. Karen had no idea how close she was to hitting a nerve. The deputies didn't press the issue yet, but their doubt lingered in the space between all of us. That's what prejudice does, it creeps in quietly, just enough to tilt the scale. Then something else happened. A third car pulled up. An unmarked black SUV, tires kicking up dust as it stopped behind the patrol units. The door opened and out stepped Lieutenant Carla Reyes. I'd only met her once, briefly. She was Sarah's old mentor, a woman Sarah deeply respected, and someone who'd actually stood by her during the internal affairs mess. What was she doing here? And how did she get involved so fast? When Reyes locked eyes with Sarah, something passed between them, something unsaid. But Sarah didn't relax. She looked wary. And that's when another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Karen hadn't just called 911. She had gone through the HOA email group. I remembered now she'd complained about lawless behavior on our property the week before. Reyes must have been looped in, which meant this was bigger than just a concerned neighbor incident. It was starting to feel coordinated. Meanwhile, Karen stayed at the fence line, watching everything unfold with that sharp, performative concern that only made sense if you didn't know she'd been trying to get us to sell this land for over a year. She once offered to help us relocate so the subdivision could extend the walking path. We refused. She didn't like that. So now this? Was it about the gun, or was it always about control? Reyes finally stepped in, greeting the deputies with a cool nod before turning to Sarah. Can we talk inside? She asked, quiet but firm. Sarah hesitated, just a beat too long. And then she nodded. The three of them walked toward the house, leaving me and Karen outside, though she'd shifted her stance now, arms looser like she thought she'd won something. I turned to look at her, not saying a word. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. And in that silence, one question echoed in my head: what if this wasn't about today at all? What if the call, the deputies, the unmarked car, all of it was never just about a woman with a gun? Inside the house, the air felt too still, like even the walls were waiting to hear what would happen next. Sarah sat at the edge of the couch, her badge and ID still out on the coffee table. Lieutenant Reyes stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes scanning the field outside like she didn't trust what might be creeping in. The two deputies lingered near the door, uneasy, like they weren't sure if they were here to witness something or stop it. I stood in the hallway, watching from a distance. I wasn't invited into that room, but I wasn't about to leave her alone either. You should have called me directly, Reyes said finally, her voice low but tight. You knew this would get complicated. Sarah didn't blink. I didn't do anything wrong. I was walking my property, with a licensed firearm, off duty. Legal in this county and every county within 200 miles. I'm not saying you broke the law, Reyes replied. I'm saying there are eyes on you. Still. And this call, this neighbor, is not just noise anymore. Someone's using it. That word. Using. Sarah leaned back, and for the first time since the officers arrived, I saw her hand tremble slightly as she reached for her badge. Do you think this is retaliation? Reyes didn't answer right away. That silence was the answer. Outside, Karen hadn't moved far. She was still by the fence, pretending to scroll on her phone, but it was obvious she was watching the window. Watching us. Like she expected to be proven right. I remembered something Sarah said months ago after the IA hearing ended. They won't come after me directly. They'll let the noise pile up until something sticks. At the time, I thought she was being paranoid. Now, I wasn't so sure. One of the deputies coughed softly. Ma'am, we just need to document everything. You understand how it looks. Civilian clothes. Firearm visible. Resident complaint. Sarah's tone stayed level, but her stare could cut steel. It looks like someone called the police on a cop who was minding her business. That's what it looks like. But she said you threatened her, the younger deputy added. Said you made a comment, hand near your weapon. That stopped everything. Sarah turned slowly. I never said a word to her. She's filing a report, the deputy said. Wants to press charges. What charges? I stepped in now, unable to hold back. Standing on your own land while being a cop? Reyes raised a hand. Let me talk to her. But before she could move, her radio cracked. Something low, then a repeat, louder, 10 to 29 possible match flagged alert, subject Sarah Bennett. Hold for confirmation. We all froze. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That's not possible. Is your system even updated? I asked, voice rising. She's cleared. No record. No holds. The radio crackled again. Confirmed, internal flag. Secondary verification required. Hold position. The deputies tensed. Sarah stood. Slowly. Then one of them, hesitant, placed a hand on his weapon. Not drawn, but close. Reyes stepped between them. Do not move. Her voice cut like glass. I looked at Sarah. She was breathing slow now. Not out of fear, but control. Training. She knew how fast this could spiral. Outside, Karen was pacing now. Watching. Smiling. And that's when Sarah said, just above a whisper, they set me up. For a long second, no one spoke. Sarah didn't blink. Reyes didn't move. And the deputy's hand still hovered just above his weapon like time had slowed down around us. Then came the real twist. The radio again, crackling louder this time. Updated alert. Internal flag traced to prior sealed complaint. Filed by Officer Carla Reyes. Repeat. Originated from Lieutenant Carla Reyes. The room turned ice cold. Sarah looked straight at Reyes. You flagged me? Reyes stepped back. Not much, just enough to show she hadn't expected that detail to come out here now. It wasn't what you think, Reyes said quickly, eyes darting to the deputies. After the hearing, I filed a precautionary note in the internal system. It wasn't disciplinary, it was to protect you. To make sure no one got to you without it being logged. But Sarah didn't hear any of that. Or maybe she did, and that's what made it worse. You told me you had my back. I did. I do. But you were vulnerable. You needed cover. No, Sarah said, shaking her head slowly. I needed truth. Not a digital leash. I felt my stomach drop. Not just because of the betrayal, but because this changed everything. Reyes hadn't come to protect Sarah. She'd come to manage the fallout. She knew the call wasn't random. She knew someone had pulled a string somewhere. And now it was all unraveling faster than she could control it. But it didn't stop there. Outside, Karen had approached the porch. No more pacing. No more pretending. She was standing in plain view of the front window now, yelling loud enough for the deputies to hear. She threatened me. She said if I ever called the police again, I wouldn't make it out next time. Sarah turned to the door, her hands clenched. That never happened. She's escalating, I warned. She knows she's losing control of the story. Reyes' face shifted, less confident now. She might have been coached. By who? Sarah asked, voice flat. That's when the second deputy, the quiet one, finally spoke. I got something, he said, holding up his phone. Karen's HOA complaint history. Dozens of reports filed, same language, different neighbors. She's been targeting minority property owners for years. And no one flagged that? I asked. She's got a cousin in the sheriff's office, he said. Buried it all under civil concerns. But she's been doing this for a while. Weaponizing the system. Sarah let out a slow breath. The pieces were locking into place. She wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor. This was targeted. Personal. Weaponized racism and reputation warfare rolled into one neat, HOA-wrapped lie. But the most chilling part? Karen had gotten close enough to record us. Her phone was raised now, screen facing the window, and she was live streaming. This is it, I whispered. She wants a reaction. A bad one. And for a flicker of a second I saw something in Sarah's eyes. Not anger. Not fear. Restraint. Because now it wasn't just about her badge or her name. It was about truth. And whether it would be enough. The silence inside the house stretched thin, tight as wire. Karen's voice filtered through the walls, louder now, dramatic, as she aimed her phone at the window. This woman threatened me. She's unstable. She has a gun. Sarah didn't move. She just stood in the middle of the room, jaw tight, fists trembling with control. I could feel the weight of every decision she'd ever made pressing in on her shoulders. All the years she gave to a system that was now questioning her. Again, because of one woman's lie and a buried betrayal. Then she turned to Reyes. You said the flag was to protect me. Then do it. Now. Reyes hesitated. That 1 second felt like a betrayal all over again. But then, Reyes squared her shoulders, took a breath and pulled out her phone. I'm calling the Internal Review Board, she said, locking eyes with Sarah, and unsealing the full complaint file. On the record, it'll show you never had a disciplinary mark, that the flag was cautionary, and that it was me who filed it without informing you. I'll take the heat. Sarah didn't thank her. Not yet. This wasn't over. The younger deputy, still holding his phone, turned to his partner. She's live streaming false information. If we don't act now, this could blow up fast. Sarah nodded, stepped toward the door. No weapon, she said. Body cam on. She clipped her badge to her waistband, turned on her own off-duty camera, something she'd carried for months since the internal affairs hearing. A habit. A precaution. A lifeline. We stepped out onto the porch together. The air buzzed with tension. Karen didn't lower her phone. There she is, Karen said, voice rising with performance. Everyone, look, this is the woman the sheriff's office is letting run loose with a gun. She threatened me. Sarah didn't respond right away. She took one step forward. I'm Officer Sarah Bennett, she said clearly, calm and direct. You're on my property. You've accused me of a felony in front of a live audience. I'm informing you now that you are being recorded. You have the right to remain silent. Karen scoffed. You don't get to arrest people. You're suspended. I'm off duty, not suspended. My status is active. I'm carrying legally on my land, and I've just been informed by 2 deputies and a lieutenant that your complaint history includes racially motivated false reports. Your video is now evidence. And so is mine. Karen faltered. Sarah stepped closer. You wanted to ruin my life with a lie. But all you've done is prove your pattern on camera in real time. I suggest you end this live feed unless you want the defamation suit to be the next thing that shows up at your doorstep. Karen's phone lowered. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. For once, she had nothing left to say. The deputies came down the steps behind us. One of them gently but firmly took the phone from Karen's hand and told her she'd be contacted by the legal team for questioning. Karen didn't argue. She just walked away. No more words. No more threats. Just silence. Back inside, Sarah collapsed into a chair. The storm had passed, but the damage lingered. And then Reyes cleared her throat. There's something else. You need to know. Sarah looked up. That internal flag you were hit with today? It wasn't just my cautionary note. Someone else filed a secondary complaint under my login. Months ago. Before the hearing ended. Sarah's breath caught. Who? I don't know yet. But someone wanted you flagged. Quietly. Permanently. We both stared at her. The relief we just felt twisted into something darker. Because it wasn't just about Karen. Or the HOA. Or even Reyes' mistake. This was part of something bigger. And whoever was behind it. They weren't done yet. The days that followed moved slowly, like the land itself was exhaling. The air felt lighter, the horses calmer. And though the memory of that morning lingered like dust caught in sunlight, something had shifted inside all of us. Karen was issued a cease and desist for harassment and public defamation. The HOA board, already weary of her antics, quietly removed her from any unofficial oversight roles. Turns out, a few neighbors had also been threatened or cornered by her in ways they hadn't spoken about. Until now, our ranch had become a spotlight, and it forced others to find their voice. The deputies later returned, not to investigate us, but to apologize. The younger one admitted he'd gone home that night questioning everything he assumed when he first stepped out of his patrol car. He thanked Sarah for staying calm, for showing him what real strength looked like. As for Reyes, she kept her word. She filed a statement, fully clearing Sarah of any internal watch flags, and launched an inquiry into who had accessed her login. It would take time, but one thing was clear. Someone inside the system had tried to silence Sarah long before Karen ever picked up her phone. And that wound was deeper, but it wasn't wide enough to stop her. Sarah didn't return to duty right away. Instead, she stayed here on the ranch. She took longer walks, started training younger women interested in law enforcement. Quiet, one-on-one mentorships. No sirens, just purpose. I remember asking her one evening as we watched the sun slide below the hills, "Do you regret it?" Speaking up back then, she took a long breath before answering. No, because silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps the wrong people comfortable. And I understood. She hadn't just worn the badge. She'd earned it every day by refusing to let fear rewrite the truth. Even when it came from people she trusted. Even when it came from the inside. This story wasn't about a neighbor gone rogue. It was about power, who thinks they deserve it, and what happens when someone strong enough stands up and says, "No more." So if you're watching this and you've ever been told to stay quiet, to shrink yourself, to let things slide for the sake of keeping peace, remember this: peace that costs your dignity isn't peace at all. It's surrender in disguise. Stand firm. Know your rights. Know your worth. And never mistake someone else's fear for your failure. Because the truth has a way of rising. And when it does, even the Karens of the world can't talk over it.